Hello, everyone. This is Victor Wooten. Thank you for joining me here with Anthony and Gregg on Case for Bass. We're making a good case for the bass. Thanks for joining us.
Victor Wooten.
JD. What? That was funky.
bass master, bass legend, all around cool guy, Victor Wooten. And Victor has been kind enough to grant us an interview and talk, and we're going to deep dish, what it is to play bass. And Victor's got a long resume of accomplishments and achievements. And what we do is I pass it back to Anthony for the first question.
Okay, Vic, as it goes, did the bass choose you or did you choose the bass?
My brothers chose the bass for me. I'm the youngest of 5 brothers. And when I was born, I'd probably say maybe even before I was born, they already needed a bass player. And I was the lucky choice.
Okay, so growing up in your house, you have your brothers. Your brothers played the Saturday night of the bass camp.
Yeah.
You guys were super tight. What were you listening to in your house growing up? Like, what were your influences? And this is based upon what your brothers were listening to and what your parents were playing back in the day, because we have very similar upbringings as well.
Absolutely. I'm the youngest, so I was born in September 64. So my brothers were born in 50s and Joseph in 61. So if you think about radio back then, pop radio wasn't a style of music. Pop was just short for popular. So of course we had jazz radio stations. There were rock, there's classical, R&B, whatever you want to call it back then. But the pop stations played all of it as long as that song was popular. So on the pop stations, you could hear everything. And we heard everything. Our parents played it all. And then we also had record players. So on Sunday morning, Mom would be playing gospel, Mahalia Jackson. She'd be playing Nina Simone, all kinds of stuff like that. Dad liked to listen to country music. So he loved Burl Ives and Willie Nelson, all this kind of stuff. So we got to hear it all. We really did. But we gravitated towards the soul music. Oh, yeah, of course, in the 70s, Motown. But you might even be able to go back before that. And where there was some great artists. But we were listening to all of it. Curtis Mayfield, James Brown, of course, Jackson 5, Earth, Wind and Fire, Stevie Wonder. And and even the stuff that was popular before that.
Okay.
We heard a lot of stuff, and our parents allowed us to listen, to whatever we wanted.
Okay. Did you also grow up on like funk bands like Ohio Players and BT Express and Slave and groups like that as well?
Of course. Yeah, we grew up. We knew all of that stuff. Still know all this. That's why you hear us playing.
I know.
Yeah.
Actually, I will comment at the base camp. You guys did a beautiful medley of Sly and the Family Stone. It was super bad. It was so good. And honestly, I think about it, and it's like, I'm like, man, like it's so tight, and just the way you drive. And you would think that because you have a drummer, guitar player, bass player, keyboardist, you would think that there's like 50 guys there doing this stuff. Like you sound like an orchestra. But the groove is so tight between you and your brother. Wait, that's Roy who's on drums, or
Roy on drums.
Roy on drums, Reggie, and then Joseph.
Yes.
And just the groove, like I couldn't stop dancing. I was just like, look, I like to dance anyway. As you probably noticed at the camp, I can get up and dance anywhere. But when the groove hits, it's like you just can't stop. Okay,
that's what we did as kids, Anthony. That's what we did as kids. Is we were making people dance. Played a lot of clubs as kids. I was lucky enough to be doing it very, very young and learning how to make people dance. And but that's what the music's for, is to move you. It's dance music. Yeah.
Okay. So speaking of clubs, when did you make your first appearance? Here you are, a young kid. You come out of the womb. There's a bass waiting for you, and all of a sudden you got to go out and go on tour. So I think historically you mentioned one of your first gigs was with Curtis Mayfield, or you ended up eventually going there.
Yeah. So when we did the Curtis Mayfield tour, in 71 or 72 maybe. So in 72, I was in the 2nd grade. So we had been playing a while before that. That's how Curtis and his people saw us, because we were doing gigs. So yes, I was lucky enough because of my brothers, not really because I'm special. I was just born into it. I had been playing gigs since before I started kindergarten, so we were all very young.
Wow.
And Reggie, being the oldest, he's only 8 years older than me.
Mm.
We were all very young, all five of us. See, we had a brother named Rudy. Also,
Okay.
Rudy was a saxophone player,
Okay.
and even as a kid, he would play two saxes at once.
Whoa.
Oh my God.
Absolutely,
Wow.
So he was our horn section.
Oh my
Mm.
God.
Yeah,
I like
and
that.
so- what's that?
I like that. Literally, one man is like two horns.
Yeah, literally. He played a C melody that a lot of people don't remember, and an alto. So they were minor thirds apart. So he could play harmony.
Wow.
And if we needed a third line,
At the
Joseph
same time.
third line on the keys.
Okay.
I mean, because you got to remember back then, thinking 60s, 70s, and part of the 80s. Speaking of the Ohio players, you had horn bands,
Yes. Yes.
right? Earth, Wind, and
Mhm.
Fire, Blood, Sweat, and Tears,
Chicago brass construction.
right,
Yep.
right. Tower of Power, the
Tower
Memphis.
Power.
There was always horns on records.
Yep.
Even the early Stevie Wonder, And so we were playing all of that, and Rudy could carry it, man, with two horns. It's amazing.
Wow.
That's
Mr.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Yep. So when you first started, did you realize that back then? Did you have the foresight to see that you'd be here today doing
Nah.
this cool interview?
No.
Or-
Reggie probably did, but no. So for me, it was just a way to belong
Okay.
with my four older brothers.
Mhm.
Mm,
Every little kid looks up to their older siblings, male or
Sure.
female. You look up to them, and I have four. I still have, in my mind, I got four older brothers. So three of them are still alive, but I still learn from all four, and they're still superheroes to me.
Wow.
So as a little kid, I was allowed to belong and do what they did as an equal.
Mm,
They didn't treat me like the little brother. You go do this or whatever. It was an equal.
Mhm.
Okay.
I want to ask: was there, like, because you had the bass and your other brothers are on more melodic instruments, did you get this urge, this need that you wanted to do more with it to contribute?
Well, yes and no. It wasn't really because I wanted to do more. It was just, it's like when you grow up in a family that speaks that language, you learn all the words they know.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like, oh, I want to learn to speak as well as them.
Mm-hmm.
It's just infiltrating in. So if you think of this, I grew up all the time sleeping in the same bedroom as the greatest saxophone player I know and the greatest keyboard. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So seeing this on the keys infiltrated into my bass.
It all permeated.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, if we think of a saxophone being vertical, right?
Sure.
If you lay it on its side, what's it look like?
A fretted instrument.
Fretted instrument.
Absolutely.
Yep, yep.
Absolutely. So my young brain could see that for some reason. I could just apply
That's
the
cool.
ideas here.
Okay.
Now, drums is obvious. Drums and the bass, the rudiments. My brother Roy's learning, reading books, paradiddles, radimacules, double paradiddles. It just made sense on the bass. And Reggie was playing chords and lines and distortion and tapping. Of course.
Yeah.
I
Exactly.
grew up with all this stuff. So why not do it? It wasn't really special to me.
Okay.
It wasn't like, oh man, I gotta do this so I can be famous, win a Grammy. No, my brothers were doing it. It's the same way my brothers were on the basketball court up the street. I was there too, playing two-hand touch football. I just did whatever they did. I never thought as a kid I was going to grow up to be a professional musician.
Wow. What was the very first bass you had?
Oh no, he's gonna get it.
Oh, cool.
Are you kidding? Oh my God. Oh.
Oh, he's got a
That was the first bass.
Yeah.
Victor Wooten had.
So
Anthony asked, Victor delivered.
it's a Univox.
Okay.
Okay.
If I can get it in focus. Yep, Univox. Yep. And it's really small. Somewhere I've got some pictures of me with it. Maybe I can send you one.
Yes,
But,
that'd be awesome.
It's a very, very small bass.
Mm-hmm.
My parents, it was like the smallest one they could find for me because I've always been short.
Wow.
You probably saw me the other day, Anthony, and was like, I didn't know you was that short.
No. When I first met you at Sam Ash, that's when I walked in and said, "Damn, I didn't realize he was that short." It
So
was at the meet and greet. Yes.
took my parents a while to find a small enough bass,
Okay.
and that was my first bass at Univox.
Is that fretted? That bass?
It's fretless now. It
Okay.
came fretted, but like all of us, when Jocko hit the scene,
Oh yeah.
if we had two basses, if we were lucky enough to have two basses, we took the frets out of one up.
I did that.
So
I did
yeah,
that growing up.
Reggie helped me way back there, probably in the 80s. Reggie helped me pull the frets out, and we put some kind of putty or something in there. But
Wow.
Look at that.
yeah.
Look at that.
Anyway,
There's still inspiration in it.
There is. Yeah. So
That's
so that was.
beautiful.
I'm truly impressed that you were able to keep that original instrument. That's awesome.
Right.
oh yeah.
That thing is great. So
That's incredible.
that you now play the Federa, which was the Yin and Yang logo that you were you part of that design?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
awesome. Now, in between your Univox and your Federa, what other basses that you've encountered that you fell in love with or you fell out of love with in the process? Like, what made it work for you?
Sure. My second bass was a limbic bass,
Ooh.
Oh, wow.
and I still have that here too. It's somewhere here.
Okay.
Because I'm such a Stanley Clarke fan. I'm a huge Stanley Clarke fan.
Yeah, who's not?
And a used Olympic bass showed up at the music store, and my brothers talked my parents into buying it.
Wow.
Only difference is my Olympic is a Series 1,
Mhm.
Okay.
which is a tree.
Mhm.
It's
Right.
like it's like as tall as a tree, way too big for me.
Wow.
But it was an Olympic, like Stanley
It
Clarke.
didn't matter.
Olympic.
You'll grow into
Yes,
it.
sir.
Stanley plays the small Olympics. I don't know what series that is, but the Series 1 is way too big.
Mm.
And it's still too big for me. But I still have it because that's my
Stanley,
second.
Stanley gifted you a bass. Wasn't it one of his piccolo basses he gifted you?
No, it's not a piccolo. It's his regular bass. It's actually
Regular
the
bass.
one he played school days on.
Oh,
So you probably saw it. It was probably at camp.
oh no, there's a picture of me with it actually. At the camp. Yeah.
So
yeah.
That's a picture of him leaving with it.
Right.
Exactly.
It's really small. And I never knew Stanley played these small ones. I just knew he was really tall, and I thought they looked small.
Mhm.
Mm,
But mine is a bigger model, way too big for me or anyone.
wow.
Stanley plays a smaller model, and but it's not a piccolo, even though he uses the same kind of bass and he'll string it up a little higher for his piccolos or his tenor bass, which is ADGC.
Sure.
So my first bass was this Univox here. My second bass was the big Olympic. My third bass was my Federa. So I've really played three basses
Wow.
in my life
You played three basses your entire life.
for the most part. Now I do have different Federas,
Okay.
but three
That was
different
the
models.
first
I mean, all my Federas are the same model. It's the
Oh,
mono
wow.
bass.
Okay.
We're going to call that loyalty.
Yeah.
A lot
That
of
is-
people want to go through a forest of bases, and just me, I'm the opposite. I got three bases. They're all 94s. I've been playing them since 94. I'm a Fender DNN guy. There's a Music Man. There's a G&L. There's a Fender. There's a Kubicki custom fretless. But people go, why don't you change? I go, I can't. I love it. I live it. I keep it.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, let's
I'm
go
glad-
into your. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. It's just
Okay.
some people are one way or the other, you know.
Yes.
But to hear Victor's had his bass this long and playing it that way, it's a testament to loyalty.
Yes. So let's talk about that with the Federa. So, how did you meet the guys from Federa? Like, where did they? Was it through the Bela Flec and Bela Flec tone years, where you even encountered them, or was it earlier?
It was earlier than the Flick Tones. My brothers and I were doing a record for Arista Records in the early 80s, around 81 probably through like 80, 84 or so. And we were in the studio with a big time producer. This guy was producing Whitney Houston's first record. He was producing some early Kenny G, and he was producing these 5 brothers called the Wootens, Wooten Brothers. And so we're in the studio. Actually, 2 of my brothers who you met, Roy and Joseph, they're on Whitney Houston's very first record.
Oh wow! Okay,
They're
awesome.
on the record, yeah. But we were in the studio, and I had my Alembic, my huge Alembic, and this producer, he said he didn't like Alembics.
Really?
So another guy, a studio musician who was in the studio with us, a great guitarist named Ira Siegel, New York guy.
Oh, New York guy. Yeah.
Ari's played on so many records.
Everything. Oh my God.
Yeah. Well, he said, I have some friends that make basses. You want me to call them? I said, yeah, call them up. So Joey Laracella, which is Vinny Fodera's partner since forever, shows up at the studio with 2 basses, 2 Fodera basses. So what I didn't know is at the time, I didn't know this. This was the first year they started making Fodera basses.
Oh wow!
So we happened to find each other in their first year. He shows up with 2 basses. One of them had the same top, the same wood as my Alembic, which is zebra wood, brown and black stripes. So that one kind of looked like my Alembic. So I kind of took to the other one, which was a maple top, flame maple, a lighter top.
Okay.
So I held that thing in my hands, and I had gone from this huge Alembic to this bass that felt like me. Now,
wow.
I don't remember ever plugging it in. I must have, but it was the way it felt, and it just felt right, you know. And I knew in the back of my mind, I probably said, if it feels this good, whatever it sounds like, I can make it sound good. I will say this: the number one thing that drew me to that bass was how it felt when I put it in my hand.
So you knew right away. Instantaneously. Like once you grabbed it, you were like, "This is it.
Yep.
This is my baby."
And that was in 1983, and I've been playing Fodera since then.
When you got the Alembic and the Alembic was put in your hands, it was kind of an opposite situation where you almost had to force it to feel good. And,
I did,
and
Stanley
just
Clarke was
hearing
playing
from you, yeah.
That's
what I'm saying.
I don't care what it felt like. This is what Stanley Clarke is playing, you know.
Yeah,
and
well, no one else will play
you heard
as well.
it, but you came back.
Stanley Clarke, John. I used to always jokingly say how heavy they were because John Entwistle from the Who was always sitting down with him, or if he played, he didn't move very much because I'm saying it to myself. This guy we must have a serious back issue. Or if you buy an Alembic, you have to. They should actually include like a year of chiropractic visits, just to keep you in check.
Well, Stanley was smart though. He played a smaller model.
Okay.
He didn't play the Series 1.
Okay.
And it's the same model that you got to play at the camp.
Yes.
So that's a good feel. That bass feels good. It's nice and small.
Yes.
And on Stanley, it looked like a bow tie or a ukulele. It's so small.
It looks
because it was so small. Well, Stanley's got to be at least 6'2", 6'3", so he's got the height.
At least, yeah.
At least.
Wow. So you're been a Fodera guy since back in the day, and I get the impression that you're not trying anything else. You're just simply locked into this bass.
I mean, I'm not looking for anything else, but I try everything.
Okay.
People show me basses all the time, but I'm not looking to replace what I'm comfortable with. You know.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's talk.
Wait, the end of the story is: did the producer like the Fodera?
Yeah, that's a whole nother show.
We got time.
That's a whole nother show because the producer had his own ideas. It wasn't really, as I look back now, I realize it wasn't really about getting this record out. Now, our record, I don't want to go so into it, but I will say this. Our record was a way for the producer to accumulate money.
Okay.
In what sense?
In the sense that he was able to okay, I'll put it this way. When the brothers heard that we were over budget on our record, and the producer said, I have to go back to Arista to get more money. That's when things got a little fishy. Now,
Sure.
we had never really been in a big studio. This was a huge record label and all this kind of stuff. But when he said we're over budget, and we didn't even have 4 songs completed.
Wow. Okay.
We had started 4 songs and none of them were completed. And we knew that we hadn't spent any money. Okay, there was supposed to be money in the budget for instruments. The record label was supposed to pay for the Fodera, but they didn't. And it was only $500, I think, at the time.
Right.
So that had to come out of our pocket with money we didn't have.
Okay.
So all of a sudden, we're over budget.
Okay.
The producer's getting more money on our behalf. So all of a sudden, over years going by, this producer's living in a apartment in New York City, but now he buys an estate in Connecticut, Stamford, Connecticut. He buys the first black baseball player, Jackie Robinson. He buys the Jackie Robinson estate.
Oh wow!
Swimming pool, builds a studio, and here we are with only not even 4 songs done.
Wow!
And you're out of money.
And he's doing all this. He's starting his second record, driving a Jaguar, and then something's like, okay, wait a minute. All right, records really take this long? And we, some of us are in New York. Some of us now, we got to get jobs at the amusement park. I'm playing bluegrass fiddle, at a country and western. So I'm like, okay, we're trying to figure out what's going on now. And then the second time, the second time the producer came to us and said, hey, I have to put you guys on hold again because the producer he says the record label wants me to start working on my record again. This is the third record of his now.
Oh, God.
Wow.
So when we first started, he had a record. Then we got put on hold so he could put his record. He had to finish his second record. Then we were going about get put on hold again so he could finish his third record. Finally, we're like, okay, we see what's going on.
It sounds like he's robbing you guys to make more money.
Totally, but we had no money, so he was getting it on our behalf from the record label.
In your name.
In our name.
Wow.
Right. So Whitney's record came out, Kenny G's record came out, ours was just being delayed as money was being sucked in. And so I can look back on it now, but we learned a lot. No harm done. This is sad, and I'm not happy about this, but that producer is now dead. Arista Records doesn't even exist anymore.
Right.
So our record that eventually did come out has very little electric bass on it, all keyboard bass.
Really?
The producer's sound in the 80s.
Sure.
Yeah.
But
that bands like was it even Loose Ends? The Loose Ends, a lot of electronic groups doing all these electronic bass sounds.
That was the sound of the 80s.
Yep.
The sound of the 80s, that bouncy R&B bass.
Yep.
But now our record finally, we had to get some outside help to come in and say, hey, you got to finish this. So our project, I think, started in 81. I think that our record finally did come out with no fanfare in 85.
Okay.
In 85, finally came out. You can still find a few copies in some old used record stores every once in a while. I see them.
Nice.
But no money. And now some German company owns that whole Arista catalog.
Wow.
Somebody else's kids is going to own our music. But we're the only ones that are still around.
Wow. So everyone's gone, and that's it. But you were able to sustain.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the Bela Flec years, because were you playing? Did you find Bela Flec, or how did? Because you mentioned that you were playing country bluegrass while you were working on your album.
Absolutely. Okay.
And does that bridge the connection to the Bela Flec years?
Absolutely. Okay. So in many cases, no, not many cases. In every case, life knows more than we do.
Absolutely.
So, and you can call it life, nature, God, whatever you want. Spirit, universe, I don't care what you call it. There's something out there that knows more than we do. I'm gonna be 60 this year. So even music is older than 60 years.
Absolutely.
So it wouldn't make sense for me to think I know everything that's going on about music or life, because they've both been around a lot longer than me. So I can look back now and see the blessings in all the things that felt like curses back then. Getting that job at Busch Gardens made me a better musician as well as a better person.
Okay.
For one, it's like when you move out of your house after living with your parents for whatever, 18 years, you finally move out of your house, you become a more powerful, stronger, educated, stable human being.
Yep.
Busch Gardens in Williamsburg, Virginia, caused me to become a better musician, because for the first time, here I was playing regularly with people who weren't my brothers.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Playing a style of music I claimed to dislike.
Gotcha.
I didn't think I liked, country and bluegrass, and I'm playing violin, not even bass in the beginning.
Okay.
Wow.
So, but to cut the story way short, I met my wife at Busch Gardens, and it was that first year that another fiddle player who was helping me get better was born and raised in Nashville and knew everybody. He knew Bela Flec, great bass player Edgar Meyer, Sam Bush, Tony Rice. He knew all the great bluegrass musicians.
Yes.
And so, to cut that story short, that's how I met Bela. My friend Kurt would go back to Nashville and say, "You got to hear these black guys playing country music and bluegrass. And he can play German music, Italian music. These kids can play anything." And so when I went to visit my friend Kurt, many years later, I went to visit him in Nashville. He introduced me to everybody, Bela, just all the great musicians. And Bela and I'll just say that's how the connection came with Bela. We sat down and jammed. One thing led to another. We've been playing together for about 35 years now.
That's incredible.
First of all, I'm gonna give a big shout out to Holly Wooten for making everything at the camp very cool. So, congratulations on meeting her at Busch Gardens.
Yeah,
my Holly, never had that.
It's much better because of her.
That's incredible. When you had to make this transition and you're playing with your brothers, you become very comfortable in your style, and you're forced to break out. When you had to learn to accept things like playing bass with bluegrass, and now you're opening up this gap, and when did you find the power? When did you realize that I own this, and that I'm going to be able to use this to better what I'm doing?
To use what?
The style of playing that was different from what you were used to. Because if you're used to playing rock, or you're used to playing funk, when you go into a mode of bluegrass, you have to give up this inflection of pushing forward to then come back and open up these gaps so that these other players can stretch. Did something like that occur where for me anyway, it did, because I went from playing Rush and, the Who to playing like a newgrass style, and I'm going goong, 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 goong. And now I'm meshing with a mandolin player, and I feel like we're going down the railroad track in that 2-car, that pusher thing.
It probably wasn't until I met Bela in '87 that I realized the benefit of my years at Busch Gardens. So you got to remember, when we got to Busch Gardens, it was because of a bad record deal. So the beginning of Busch Gardens mentally wasn't a pleasant thing. I'm just here until the 5 brothers can get back together. I'm not staying here. This is a side thing. But life was teaching me a whole lot about life as well as music. So when I met Bela and the two of us sat in his kitchen and jammed, without those years of Busch Gardens, I wouldn't have had as much to offer Bela as I did when we sat there. He went to this bluegrass thing, and I was there with him. I could be right there with him, but I could add myself to it.
Yes.
Because we could jam. Now, I grew up jamming. I can jam with the best all day.
Exactly.
Right? And it doesn't matter the style anymore. Where I grew up playing, funk and some rock and a little bit of jazz. By the time I met Bela, I had this whole country bluegrass and what they call newgrass.
Newgrass.
Which in my mind is just bluegrass mixed with jazz.
It's a funk and right.
Oh my goodness. Bela hadn't heard, and neither had I. Hadn't heard any of this kind of music with the banjo and me being this funky jazzy bass player.
Right.
Who had at least I had 1.5 feet of my feet firmly in bluegrass.
Sure.
I still had some things to learn.
Okay.
Sam Bush, the mandolin player, telling me, don't go boom, pa,
Yeah.
Don't put that backbeat in there like you do in the funk band.
Right.
Sam, that's my job. I put the backbeat there, and I was like, "Oh man, thank you for telling me. I'm out of there."
Wow. So the mandolin player handles that part. That's not the bass player's part.
Right. If you think of bluegrass bands, a typical bluegrass band doesn't have a drummer.
Right.
That's true.
They have a mandolin player.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's the drummer. That's where that rhythm's coming from.
And the mandolin and the bass co-weave into this.
That's the rhythm
force.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's almost like melodic rhythm. It's very percussion like at the same time.
Sure.
Yep.
Sure.
Well, the point being that the stringed instruments are percussive,
right.
and you're able to open up this new vent of air by not having a drummer laying, something to go by. You are it that they go by.
Right. And I will say this for anybody. If you want to hear some of the world's best musicians, listen to bluegrass. And if you want to go further, listen to newgrass.
Wow.
All right. So check out a band back in the 80s and 90s called the Newgrass Revival. So that's the band Bela Flec was in when I first met him.
Really?
Okay.
Then keep going. Okay, keep going. You're going to find this guy named Chris Thiele playing mandolin.
Oh, I worked with Chris Thiele at the town hall for Live From Here.
All right, that's a man.
I fell in love with his playing almost immediately, and I'll tell you why. What Chris Thiele would do that was interesting, Chris Thiele was the successor to Pierre Perry Companion. Got his name, Garrison Keillor.
Yeah.
What was unique about Chris Thiele, he would do like these birthdays. He would do like Aaliyah's and just do it all on the mandolin. Like he would take pop culture songs, R&B songs. He would take hip hop tracks and then say, "Okay, we're celebrating Tribe Called Quest's birthday, so we're gonna do that." And he would do it on the mandolin.
Oh
so
yeah.
I fell in love with him probably as soon as I saw him play the Aaliyah track. I was like, "This guy is badass. He is so good."
He is, and he was the same way at 14.
Wow.
So remember being on the bluegrass scene with Bela, I remember seeing these young kids that were just tearing it up in all these
coming
different
off the mountain and just exploding. They covered all the angles.
Absolutely.
Wow. Let's talk about winning your Grammy, your first Grammy. Well, let me backtrack. The fact that you're officially going to be 60. You've been working in the industry since 80 since you were like born.
37.
Yeah. So for your did you realize that, because we talk about working bass players, do you realize that you are like this working bass player who's like become very influential? Not just a working player, but you've become very influential to guys like me, guys like Gregg, coming out of nowhere, being able to finger tap, being able to do the double thump. I mean, all these little things like that. Did you have? So you mentioned your brothers had the foresight to see it for you guys as a band, but did you look at that or do you ever look back and go, this is kind of cool. Like, how did I get here?
Yeah. I look back on it now and I know exactly how I got here. It's a lot of work. You know, it's nearly 60 years of doing this thing called music. Nearly 60, maybe 58 years of doing it.
Mhm.
And I can see my influence. I really can.
Okay.
And it would be, naive to say, and a lie to say that I can't.
Sure.
I know that I've influenced a lot of musicians, not just bass players, but there have been a whole lot of people who have influenced me.
Sure.
And
Mhm.
and I try to always make that apparent. I make sure I recognize those people. But in most cases, you don't know what you're doing or what you've done probably until decades after you've done it.
Okay.
Mhm.
Hard to know. And like this great show that we're doing. You don't really know the influence it's going to have on people until minimum 10 years from now.
Anthony
True.
talks about that.
All the time.
Anthony
All the
talks
time.
about that.
Anthony
I'm the
who?
one who's rushing, and
Oh,
Anthony
you
goes, no, 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 just wait.
Yeah.
Yep. He wants to run it like, nope, be patient. Things will fall into place.
Now,
The
it was
main thing we need to do is make sure we're putting our best foot forward in the moment. That's the only thing we have control over.
Yes.
Is making sure that if anybody finds what I'm doing, they're going to get something out of it.
Okay.
Right? And that's a lesson from our parents, right? You don't give yourself awards, you don't win your own Grammy, you don't hire yourself. Your job is to be worthy of somebody finding something good. That's the thing that you have control over. If
It-
you go for a job, be worthy of the job. It's not up to you to get it. You're going to try to
you got to
be.
keep it.
Yep. I want you to talk about, since you mentioned your parents, the one thing that you did, you brought up a lot at the camp was the influence of your mother and your father, and particularly
Absolutely.
your mother. I mean, we have very similar upbringings.
Hmm.
My mom's from the South as well, so I know a lot of what you were talking about. I'm very familiar with. Talk about how your mom influenced your principles. Not just your, forget about the musical part. Aside from that, remove the instrument and talk about how your mother influenced your principles, because you're just, look, you mentioned before at the camp that you had an incident with someone on the basketball court. You went to go after them. And your mom pulled you aside and said, "Now imagine if this would have happened. Imagine that what could have happened." So I'm very, very familiar with that kind of mindset, as
Yeah.
opposed to go there, sick of Nick, get him. None of that.
Yeah. Our parents were amazing. They grew up in huge families. I think there were 14 kids in my dad's family, 13 in my mom's. So and they're growing up. Dad was born in 1930. I think my mom in 34. So you know what we have an idea of what this country was like for people of color in the 30s.
Oh, of course.
Right.
So to be born into a huge family, that means you're poor. The it's tough. Living is tough. You're probably living in a 1 or 2 bedroom house with 14 to 16 people. You have to get along.
Yeah.
All right. My dad fought in the Korean War on the ground. And to be frank, he was fighting for a country that wasn't fighting back for him.
No.
No.
But they taught us not to be bitter. But their main thing for us 5 boys, knowing what 5 black boys were facing in the 50s and 60s, they taught us, number one, to know who we are. Who are you as a person? You're the only person you can't get away from, even if you
No.
try. Know who you are, because if you don't know who you are, the world's going to tell you. And
Yeah.
they're probably not going to tell you the truth.
It is going to be the truth. If anything, they'll make up stuff about you that you never knew existed.
Right. Exactly. And because we're starting to find out the truth, they're trying to erase the history.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
Banning books.
Yeah.
Banning books. That's right.
Yeah. So our parents made sure that we knew who we were. And so my brothers, you've heard many of them talk. When we talk, it's borderline egotistical.
Mhm.
but it's in the right form of what's called ego. If you look up the word ego, you'll realize ego means to know thyself. It's a sense of your self-worth.
Mm-hmm.
To know that you're worthy.
Mm-hmm.
That was one of the number one things our parents wanted us to know, because the country wasn't telling us we were worthy.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Like
When I was born, my mom
validation.
couldn't vote. My mom couldn't even get to the polls when I was born in my generation. So they wanted to make sure that we knew who we were, that we knew our self-worth, that we knew that before we could give love, we had to have love.
Yes.
Right? And it starts here. My mom had a quote that says, when I wake up and look in the mirror every morning, I've already met the most important person I'm going to meet today. Starts with you. So if I talk, I think I'm right. It doesn't mean you're wrong for me to be right. That's another lesson. There's more. There can be more than one right. But I have that confidence, that awareness, that knowledge of who I am. Now, who I am is no more important than who you are.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
But you're not more important than me either. We grew up in a world where people were telling us that they're more than us.
Yes.
I knew
exactly.
And that's still like that today, believe it or not.
Well, it's a forced perception that exploits insecurity, and if you're if you're strong within yourself, like Victor's talking about, you're going to brush that off and overcome that.
Absolutely. And that was number one. Number one in our household. Know who you are, but be good. Right? Know who you are and make sure you're right. Love who that person is. Mom would always say, if you're wrong, nobody has to know you're wrong. You know you're wrong.
Wow.
Sure.
But if you're right, no one has to know you're right. You know you're right.
Exactly.
So it was all about who we were as people, but be right, be good, be something that your unconscious is proud of. Be something that, as Mom would say, God would be proud of. You know? So we grew up good kids. Now, our parents didn't really care, and not care is not the right word. It wasn't so important what we chose to do. Because if they knew that if they could cultivate who we are, who we were, good people, it wouldn't matter what we did.
You'd find a path. You'd make a path.
Yeah, absolutely. And that path would be righteous, regardless of what it is, if you're going into it from a good person's standpoint.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
So number one was who you are. What you do, that didn't matter.
Okay, let's talk about the camp years. What inspired you to want to produce this awesome camp? Like, what made you say, I want to combine nature and music. I want to bring them both together. Because there were things that I explained to some people, like a blindfolding and walking through the woods, where they completely didn't understand. But I said, look, you have to understand. You have to go through it, because when you're blindfolded, your senses are now heightened, and all of a sudden you hear this orchestration of music in nature. And the one thing that you made, that you also said that I really loved, you said, show me how many blind musicians. So you said, how many blind musicians are mediocre? They're always amazing musicians, and just that alone made perfect sense.
Wow.
And that really stuck with me. So when you get there, when you get there and you have the blindfold on, you're like, man, what's this nonsense about? But then when you actually experience it, you're like, holy crap! You find yourself creating rhythms. I would tap on a dry patch of leaves, and that would be my snare, because it was a higher pitch, and then a wet patch would be my bass drum. And then I would try to do a mix. If I was to drag my feet, I would almost create like a maraca / hi-hat kind of feel. And I would almost do it to the beat of these birds.
Yeah.
And that would kind of guide me there. Because, of course, the mystery of the unknown, whenever you're wearing a blindfold, especially when it's bright sun outside, you're like, holy crap, like this, I am blindfolded. I'm not cheating, so I want to make sure that I can't see anything. So you're forced to use your hearing. I'm sorry, this was a long question. But because I'm actually reliving.
I'm waiting for the question, Anthony.
I know. I'm actually reliving it now. But what made you and Holly say, let's do this cool camp thing?
Well, I will say this: I am lucky that Holly went with my crazy vision.
Hmm.
But the one thing I will say is Holly knew my parents.
Okay.
And when I started talking about this whole crazy idea, she got it.
Okay.
Because I use music to get people to the camp. But what my ultimate goal is to give people a piece of what I had growing up with my brothers and my parents.
Mm.
I want people, number one, to know that you are enough. Whether you learn to play the bass, whether you learn another skill or not, you're enough in this world. A lot of people are struggling to become something to fit in with somebody else's idea of what is enough.
Sure.
Wow.
And my hope is that you come to this camp and find out, wow, whether it's conscious or not, wow, I'm okay.
Mm.
I'm enough. Right? When you get there, Anthony, you don't know anybody.
No.
Right?
No, not at all.
Not at all. But when you left there, you knew about 60, 70 people.
I became very cool with everyone.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. It was
And
a very interesting thing in that way.
it's not so much that you said, oh man, if I learn another scale or if I play a good performance, people will like me. You just were being yourself. And all of a sudden you have all these people that love you.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That final night at the camp,
Oh, that was such a great night.
was that such a great night
Oh
of
my God.
everybody cheering each other on
Yep.
and,
Yes.
and hugging and dancing and
Yep.
right?
It was
That-
it was such a motivational. It was almost like music church.
Yeah.
Just the entire night for hours on end.
Yeah.
I at one point went upstairs and crashed for about 5 minutes because I was so exhausted.
Exactly.
And then I went downstairs again to continue dancing. I was like, all right, I
Yeah.
gotta get back into the groove.
So Anthony, think of this. That right there is how I grew up.
Mm.
Okay. Now, if you notice, my brothers didn't take a break.
No, they didn't.
Right?
They were
We
straight through.
could do that for hours because we grew up doing it. Our house, and I still haven't answered the question, but our house
I love it. You're right, man.
in California,
Welcome to the show.
right? We'll get there. We'll get there. But growing up in California, our house, we lived 3 houses from the corner. Everybody knew where that house was. That's where all the musicians came.
Mm.
Now, I started 3rd grade after we left California. So you know how young I was.
Mm.
So I'm in, kindergarten, 1st grade, 2nd grade. All the musicians came to our house. We jammed all the time. Dad gave us the garage. He never put the car in the garage. That was our music room.
Mm.
In the end of 72, I'm starting the 3rd grade. We moved to California. So we rent a house for the first year, but then we buy a house with a garage. All of a sudden, our garage is the central place again. So now this is where a lot of our favorite musicians came through. And I'm not saying we taught them, but we knew them. A lot of the Dave Matthews Band, James Genius, who plays bass with Herbie Hancock, and also the Saturday Night Live Band. So many great people. We would jam all day. So 5 hours, 4 hours, nothing.
Nothing.
I mean, during the summer, I say all day.
Mhm.
Now, we wouldn't wake up in the summer at 8 a.m. So the jam may not start till 1 or 2, but it would go to 10 when mom would make us stop because the neighbors would call the police.
Of course.
But it would go, and when I say all day, no stopping. No stopping. Some of the people that play with Prince used to come to the house. I mean, it was amazing. And so for the most part, I was the young guy.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes when my brothers would be home after they had graduated, and I'd be getting off the school bus 3 houses away. When we got to Virginia, we still lived 3 houses from the corner. The bus would drop me off. I could hear the music. And I could just say, as I'm walking to the house, okay, who is this today? Well, that sounds like Jimmy Lawson.
I got you.
So you knew the players just based upon how they sounded.
Yeah, exactly. Just the same way you know people's voices.
Yes.
It's same.
Yeah.
So okay, back to the question. I wanted people to have what I had growing up.
Okay.
Musically, yes, but more so personally, who you are as a person.
Mm.
I want these people to fall back in love with themselves, not because I say, hey, love yourself, meditate, blah. No, just create the environment
Mm.
where you can just be who you are.
Yep.
And now we do have a
kind of like the neighborhood block space.
yes
that people felt open enough for a big pickup game.
yes,
Yep.
but also, Greg, for the most part, unless you go to sleep off site in a hotel, our hours are long.
Yeah,
we start at 7:30.
They are.
Oh, Anthony told me. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
This is all on purpose because we only have you
Yeah, for a couple days.
It's a 6-day camp, but 2 of the days are short.
Mhm.
Right.
So we only have you for maybe 4.5, 5 days. We need to act fast to get what we want to happen. So we get you tired, right? We keep you together, and you can't escape it.
No, you can't.
In other words,
But yeah, actually, I hate this. I will admit, you don't want to.
right?
Yeah, you don't want to escape it. Like once you get into that groove, like I wake up looking forward to it.
Yeah, unplugging is something you don't want to go for.
Yeah. But at the same time, there's no internet, right?
Right.
So you're not checking Facebook every few moments. We don't give you time.
Yeah.
Okay. The food is incredible.
That's what Anthony said.
First night lobster tails. Yes, it was so good.
Yeah. Yeah.
The last thing that comes to mind with camp in general, is lobster tail and steak. We had one morning we had duck with our breakfast. It was
nice.
It was super.
That's a southern thing.
Oh, dude, it was so good.
Yeah.
He's lucky you didn't make it catch the duck.
I would be okay with giving it a shot. Just because
I know Anthony would. Anthony likes going the extra mile.
Our instructors know how to do that too. Our nature instructors.
I wanna. Can I change the subject for 1 second?
Yes.
I want to do that. I've been doing. We always find out on the show who's playing, and Anthony, gives the top of the surface questions. But I listen and I do the research, and it comes down to one thing: that if somebody said, "What could you ask Victor Wooten?" What would it be? And I'm going to preface my question by going, I just listened to three things. I listened to Victor Wooten's solo. I listened to the lesson. I listened to Victor Wooten at the high school presentation with Gregg Bissonette. And then I listened to the Wooten brothers. And I want to hear, I guess, from you, when you're solo, is it Victor hearing the voices of his brothers coming out? What comes through his head, through his hands, to make this magic happen? Number one. Number two, when you're bonding with a Gregg Bissonette who has this open smorgasbord of ideas coming at you, and you're able to open up and play whatever you want, however you want, into I'm playing with my brothers, and now I'm back in the garage at my house. Who is this Victor Wooten?
Yeah, well, overall is I'm me, and that's my overall goal, is to be as me as possible. But I want to be comfortable. A lot of people are trying to be something that they're not. But if you know and love who you are, you don't have to be anybody but you. Right. But musically, when I'm playing with my brothers, that's probably the easiest, because that's how I grew up, and I get to just be a bass player. I don't have to play a lot of melodies. I don't have to do a whole lot of solos. I don't have to do a lot of singing. I get to be a bass player. That's how I grew up.
The big vibe.
Yeah. That's what I love the most, being a bass player. Now, if I'm playing with Gregg, Gregg is a longtime friend that I first met in the early 90s.
Okay.
We recorded together. So now we're really close. So we know each other really well. I love him.
Oh my God. It just breathes.
Guy.
Yeah.
he keeps you laughing. So he's easy to play with. But if it's just bass and drums, okay, the complete thing we call music is not there with those two instruments.
I'm glad you said that.
Okay. So we've got the rhythm covered. I might even have the bottom of the harmony covered. But music needs rhythm, harmony
and melody.
and melody.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
I learned that from Alfonso Johnson, by the way, in his clinic. He gives out a 3-page dissertation because I wasn't going to ask Victor Wooten what is music because I knew I was going to hear it. And when I saw Alfonso Johnson, he hands people going, "What's this? What? We got to read something here at his clinic," and he hands this out, and it's what is music, and it's exactly what you said, what it is. Right. And the last part, which was the first part of the question, was on my phone shows up is John Patitucci, and John Patitucci is just a force. And he talks about the difference between having to play solo and having to play arrangements or with a rhythm section, and how he talks about how, wait a second, now all the pressure is falling on me to do something. And you definitely push it over the top. And when you say how you believe in yourself, it really comes through. And what I hear is you don't have an inhibition to hold back.
No, I mean, it's sort of like the three of us having this conversation. You know, two of us have never met, but we don't have a problem. We don't have a problem talking.
I agree.
We're really good with our instruments. We're really good with the language.
Yep.
And we know the rules or the formalities of conversing.
Yes.
Right? Which means a lot of listening, understanding each other. Music to me is the same, exactly the same. Exactly the same. So, but with the rhythm, harmony, and melody, music also needs lows, mids, and highs. So in other words, I could have the rhythm only on the cymbal, which is real high. I could have the harmony coming from, an accordion, the high end or the high end of the keyboard, and then I could have the flute playing the melody. That may or may not feel complete if it's all high.
It's all high.
Rhythm, harmony, and melody coming from only high may not feel complete. In other words, it's not going to get you on the dance floor.
True.
So we also need these frequencies of lows, mids, and highs.
Yep.
So when I'm playing with it, if it's just me on bass or me and a drummer, instrument-wise, we don't have that. Meaning the bass is not designed to go high or to play chords. So I have to be more than a bass player at that time.
Exactly.
Or Gregg might even start singing.
If
it's necessary. But if we're musicians, we know how to cover these three elements.
You're creating a sum greater than the parts.
Exactly. Awesome. If I'm just the bass player, I'm going to play low and something's going to be missing.
Yes.
If Gregg is just a drummer, he's going to play the beat and something's going to be missing. But Gregg is more than that. He was a trumpet player. He's a great singer. He understands music. Bela Flec was the same way when we first met. When we got together, we realized, whoa, it's all here. It's all here.
Well, you also had the fortunate experience of a future man.
Well, I'm talking about even before that.
Okay.
The first time Bela and I met, it was just him and me in his kitchen.
Yeah, it's very raw.
Wow. And when we play, because I can play drums and the bass part easily. I learned that from Larry Graham. That's how he started.
Yeah. Larry Graham.
Yeah.
Larry Graham was the man behind that.
Right. He had to become the drummer. But I've also learned, like when you listen to that song, The Lesson,
yes,
you'll hear all three parts.
Oh, yes. It's why I used it. But it was the first thing that came up. So, but you hear everything, that would create arrangement or a composition, and it's all coming through, basically your four fingers and your brain. Yeah. And one of the things that, experience it and achieving it, is how the electric bass went from a complete background accompaniment part of an ensemble to now pushing through and taking the lead role, especially with Instagram and YouTube and a lot of these influencers. I don't want to say influencers, but people that never leave their home, who are hitting parts on the bass that Coltrane was doing. And it's I'm not going to say I'm the biggest fan or proponent of it, but I would go back, if I had to choose where I would be in a bass, it would be in your garage with your brothers.
Yeah. There are a lot of people who are learning the top end of the bass before they've learned the bottom end.
Okay.
And as we said at camp, you got the upper register, you got the mid register. Down here is the cash register.
Cash register.
Yep.
So
That's true.
And I hear that, and in most cases, I can tell right away the depth of the player by what they focus on and what's coming out. But fortunately for me, I learned to play, and anyone in my age, I'm almost 60. Anyone my age, the only way we could learn to play was by playing with people.
By playing with people. Look, at the end of the day, we're all in the same checkbox. It's also generational as well.
Well, that was your social network.
That was your social network. I remember interviewing.
That was the internet.
I'm not sure if you're familiar with the band System of a Down. I'm not sure if you're familiar with those guys. They're like a new metal band. So I interviewed Chavo, who's the bass player, and a couple of other guys. I remember I was in their tour bus, and I actually, after the interview, I asked him, I said, can you know if I play your bass? And he said, yeah, sure. So of course he sees it. Oh, you took my bass apart. As I pass it back to him, he goes, oh, I'm not going to play now. I go, well, why not? He goes, no, because you set my bass on fire. And I said, no, I didn't. I said, I just played it because I felt like playing it. I said, I also grew up in an era, part of the whole Eddie Van Halen thing, where back in the day you had to play your instrument. So that was a big thing in the 80s. You had to know your instrument and actually be good at playing the instrument. Where these days, it's like you can play the instrument, but you're not playing with a conglomerate, or as we would call other musicians. They seem to be doing it as a lot of solo artists. And if it's their way of making money, that's cool. But it's like when people send me stuff like that, I go, it's impressive for about 3 minutes, and then I lose interest in it because I want to hear how they sound playing with other people.
Yeah. I get, there's a place for everything. But I know a lot of them can't get hired to play the bass. There's very few places where you can make a living playing solo bass guitar.
Yeah.
Right.
Very few, and so people want a bass player to fill that role. And in many cases, I hear people learning that second.
Sure.
How to solo and get likes. And I'm not against it. Not at all. If that's what you want to do it.
Yep.
Right? More power to you. And I'm amazed when I see a lot of it.
Yeah.
Right.
It is amazing. But no, it's even funnier. It kind of reminds me of I remember telling a guy at a bar one day, he's playing all this fancy stuff. I go, how many girls come up to you and ask you, how many notes can you play? How many girls ask you that? It's kind of the same thing when guys who are big muscular guys in the gym, I go, how many girls ever approach you and say to you, how much do you bench? I go, you don't get that. It's like if you're a good conversationalist and you make them feel good, they don't care what you do. Take that same mentality and tie that into playing with others, and then you have something that works out much better that way.
Yeah.
So I've taken what I've learned from camp and trying to really enhance it. Obviously, that was kind of a thing for me to do.
Yeah. I'm lucky, and I'm sure you all too, that we grew up in an era where we had to learn it for real.
Yes.
And then the rest of it was like icing on the cake.
Okay. All right. Awesome. My last question to you. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Let me just say this: the difference between, and at the risk of sounding egotistical, I'm gonna throw myself in this bunch. Some of us, the reason our solo bass playing works is because it's based on a foundation of what music needs. We grew up fulfilling music's need.
Exactly.
True.
Exactly.
Not
You feel
just
the whole wave.
yeah,
Yes.
not just this top layer, the icing, right? 90%, 99% is cake.
Yes,
Right?
yes.
You stick your fork in it and it's only icing, you can't eat anymore.
No, you can't.
Even though
And that was my question.
the icing might grab your attention.
Yes.
Right? But it's got to be that boring part. So you take like, a Stanley Clarke or Marcus Miller, hopefully myself, a Michael Mannering, people like that who can play solo.
Right.
It's built upon something.
Yes.
Right? It's not hollow underneath.
Yes. No.
And that's why it works.
No.
Okay. All right. My last question to you is, what do you tell an aspiring musician? Obviously, we mentioned a lot of these before, but I'd like you to sum it up. Like, what would you tell someone who wants to learn the instrument and possibly make this a professional career for himself or herself?
There's a few things that I would say. It's really first depending on who that person is. But I get a chance to meet a lot of these people at Berklee College of Music or at camp and the other schools. And you hear me say it all the time. It's who you are as a person first. That's what's going to govern everything that you do, meaning what you put into what you do. If your job is just to be famous, that's easy.
Yeah.
I can go out and rob a store right now and I'll be all over the news and everybody
Don't try it in Nashville.
But mom would say, be worthy.
Right.
You want to be famous. What are you doing I should know about?
That's true.
Yes.
Be worthy. And then
That's
even
true.
if you're not famous, you're still doing something people should know about.
Exactly.
Right? Our parents would tell us as kids, I remember mom's voice saying, you boys are already successful. The rest of the world just doesn't know it yet.
And that's cool that you had the mom to tell you that.
Absolutely. So many things. And the camp is really, I wanted people to have what I had growing up. The wisdom, the things to think about, to be honest with you, to tell you things, And again, I know that music will get people there. And so we give you music, but as you see, we give you a whole lot more than that. And that's not on the website.
Right.
No, it's not.
In most cases, we don't have to say anything. Right? We just put you in the room with other good people. All right? Give you, and we're all there because we love music. Maybe we're all there because we love the bass. Our next camp coming up is the same camp, but it's for all instruments.
That's the jam. That's the music camp or the jam camp?
Music, yeah. You went to Bass Nature. Music Nature's coming up. It's going to be all instruments. We'll have guests, some surprises again. And more than likely, the same thing is going to happen. These people are going to realize, wow, I'm enough. It may not be conscious.
Sure.
But
you're going to hit them.
Yeah. You'll find out that you love yourself and you love everybody else.
That's awesome.
That's awesome. Victor Wooten.
Victor,
five-time Grammy Award winner. Victor Wooten.
Thank you for being open and kind.
Victor Wooten, you make the case for bass.
You make the case for bass.
Thank you for having me on your show. Thank you.
We thank you all for listening to us tonight. We hope you had a good time. We are the Wooten Brothers with the Barber Brothers. Yeah. We love you, Nashville. Thank you for allowing us to be a part of your community.